Do you know that less than 15% of the books published each year by traditional publishers are by people of color? Well, on Girls Talk Books, we dive into the heart of the publishing industry, tackling the issues of diversity, representation, and access while celebrating the authors and trailblazers who are breaking barriers and making a difference. Whether you're an aspiring author, a publishing pro, or just love a great story, this is your space. So grab your notebook, your favorite drink, and let's turn your publishing dreams into reality. This is Girls Talk Books, where your voice matters. Let's go. Before there were history books, every story was passed down through oral tradition. In the African culture, the keepers of those stories were the griots. One of those modern-day griots is George Bayard. What started as a collection of African-American history has now grown into one of the largest African-American museum and archives in West Michigan. Let's welcome George Bayard, the founder of the Grand Rapids African-American Museum and Archives. All right, welcome to Girls Talk Books. Today we are here with George Bayard, who is the founder and executive director of the Grand Rapids African-American Museum and Archives.
Correct.
Thank you for joining us today on Girls Talk Books.
Thank you, Sonya.
Even though he's a guy, you can still talk, talk on our show.
Oh, yes.
So you have this beautiful museum here and bookstore and library. I'm seeing all the books that you have here. And I was talking to you earlier about the archive.
Yes.
If I worked at an archive, I'd have been fired because there are so many stories in archives that haven't even really been told yet. But it's so important for us to have a place to preserve that history.
That's exactly our mission, is to collect it, to preserve it, and then display it. And, having a museum here in Western Michigan is a big thing. Everybody's very familiar with Charles Wright in Detroit and Motown Museum down there. But here in the western side of the state, we're the only museum.
Wow.
There's a couple, up in Big Rapids, there's a Jim Crow Museum, and there is one in Muskegon Heights. But for the second largest city, we really deserve something that helps the people collect their memories, their history, and then retell it.
I love it. I love it. So before we get more into that, let's do a little backtracking about you and your life. Tell us a little bit about where you're from. And first of all, what books did you read as a child? What were some of the things that you read as a child?
I knew you were going to say that. I'm at heart an artist.
Okay.
And so, I don't want to say I just got books to look at the pictures. Right. Basically, that's what intrigued me, the artwork behind the stories that were there. So ones that had great illustrators were the ones that I gravitated to. Probably the very, 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 very first one was Little Black Sambo.
Wow.
It was read to us, which is weird because we had an all-black school. So
and you were in Philadelphia?
We were in Delaware.
Delaware,
yes. Okay. And so I remember our teacher reading it to us, but I don't know why the story just fascinated me. But once I started looking into the book, I was even really young, I would see other copies, different book companies would put out different versions of it. And sometimes he looked African, sometimes he looked Indian, sometimes he looked, he didn't even look like like somebody who was black. And so it kind of intrigued me because there were all these different versions of it. And so I always wanted, because I think it originally was an Indian kid, but it evolved or devolved over the period of time to become, more Afrocentric and more African looking. And that was kind of the early transition for me to start looking into the artwork behind some of the books that I read.
It's interesting because, when you talk about Sambo, to me, that's like a negative image of the Black culture, but they read it to you guys in school?
he
That's interesting.
he was, but the story is that he's a hero in the end. You know,
Huh.
he vanquishes the tigers and turns them into butter. So
Hmm.
he was in the Little Black Sambo history of the story. I mean, he
Hmm.
was actually a hero, and maybe that's why our teachers thought it was
Mm.
a book to read to us.
Mm.
We were in a neighborhood post World War II that was all black. One of the very first in the country, from what I can find, post World War II neighborhood. All of our streets were named after African Americans.
Mm.
I lived on the corner of Ralph Bunche Boulevard and Mary McLeod Bethune Drive.
Wow.
And other streets were Jackie Robinson Drive, Marion
Mm.
Anderson Drive. And this was in the late, early 60s,
Mhm.
late 50s. And all these people were still alive.
And this is
So
what city?
this is Wilmington.
Wilmington.
Yeah,
Oh,
Wilmington,
wow.
Delaware, and it
Okay.
was a little south of Wilmington, Delaware,
Mm.
but it was a self-contained community.
Mm.
Our teachers lived right down the street. The pastors lived right up the street. Everybody was kind of in one little unit. Our school went from K to eighth grade, I believe, and our teachers were all from HBCUs.
Mm.
We had black businessmen. We had people who owned their own businesses, and all were property owners. Everybody was
Mm.
owned their house. My dad, when he was done in World War II, came out, and this is one of the few places in the United States that the GI Bill worked. Normally, the GI Bill for African Americans, black soldiers, was non-existent. They had
Mm.
it on paper, but when they went to try and cash them in or try to buy a house, the government wouldn't let them do it.
Mm.
And this was a partnership between the federal government, the DuPont family, who owned the land for the community, which was called Dunleith or Dunleith Estates, and it was one of the very first, from what I can
Mm.
find. I think there was one in New Orleans that was established about the same time, 1950. But
Mm.
for what I know, I don't know any other post-war suburban neighborhoods that were created for African American soldiers.
Wow.
And he raised a family, and as I said, we were very very much into African American culture because it was right there in front of us every day.
Hmm. And did you guys have a museum there? Like how are they
We
teaching
really
you?
didn't. It was in our school. Our school, like I said, was manned by HBCU
Hmm.
graduates. So everything we learned was from our teachers.
Hmm.
Unlike schools today, we had plenty of male black teachers, which is a shortage today.
Hmm.
We were like for science class,
Mhm.
instead of sitting in a classroom, we just go outside and go into the woods, or
Hmm.
it was a lot of land around it. We'd take science class outside.
Wow.
Um, our our gym or our sports teams were, of course, probably the best in the area. Even though we didn't have a track, we had all
Mhm.
the track records, and
Wow.
so and
Okay.
so and then, like I said, it was a bucolic kind of a feel, but it was
Mhm.
really just the fact that you could interact with everybody. I mean, like I said, our pastor at our church, there were two churches. Our church, Reverend Moyer, was a classmate of Dr. King,
Oh, wow.
and he actually brought Dr. King to Wilmington to speak. But in that, even in our church, we learned about protest. We learned about standing up for our own rights. And so it was all ingrained.
Hmm.
And we were very happy to come from that environment. And I think in my, I'm going to say, seventh or eighth grade, integration came in,
Hmm.
and so we were bused to all white school, and we, we got in there, knowing that we were equal, and it caused for some problems in the new school, but they had a bunch of African American kids coming in, their students, who were proud.
Right.
They were proud, and they were knowledgeable about things that had to do with Black history. So when I graduated, went to University of Delaware. And that's a whole big story too. But my sister and I both graduated University of Delaware. Yet we didn't know it at the time. And it gets back into the collecting part. We had land that abut up to Delaware State College. And so all this time in our family, nobody told us that we had land in Dover, Delaware, next to Delaware State College. We could have sold the land and went for free.
Wow.
but we didn't know because nobody talked about it. And we didn't even know until I took over my grandmother's house as she went into a nursing home, going through papers and going through boxes and trunks. We found these deeds for this land. It was like, what is this? My brother and I go down and find out that the land is right next to the college. Wow. And that they had been trying to contact the people in the family to buy the land to build dorms.
Wow.
And so we were like, man, we could have went for free and we didn't even know it. We did find out too that by digging through, we saw these other photographs, and that was one of the things that my grandmother collected was photographs, literally 1,000 photographs. And one of them was her sister, who was one of the founders of Delaware State College. Now we had a relative who was a founder. We had land next to the college. They even had a dorm named after her, and we never knew it.
What was her name?
Her name was Marie Laws, and she was one of the early founders. There were I think 8 professors that founded the college. And
was this a white college?
Oh no, this is HBCU.
Oh
yeah.
wow, okay.
Yeah, Delaware State is HBCU, but
okay.
We went to the University of Delaware, which was a white college at the time. Matter of fact, our class was the largest African American class to that time, and since now they've gotten larger classes, but we were probably the largest class to go into the University of Delaware because it was still pretty segregated in the well, that would have been in the early 70s.
Wow.
They just didn't recruit African Americans, and most of the African Americans in the state of Delaware, a small state, went to Delaware State College. I mean, so it was.
So I want to know what happened to the land. So when you guys saw the deeds, did you guys still own it?
My cousin ended up taking advantage of it. My dad and my uncle sold the land to the college, and they bought it and built dorms on it.
Oh wow!
And then there was some other land there too that was landlocked. Some person landlocked my grandmother's land so that we had to go across their land to get to our land, which was in all extent their land, because we had to cross their land to get to our land. So, but the land that abut up to the college was sold, and we were able to take that money, and my cousin was the one who took advantage of it. Okay. We had all graduated by then, and so, but it would have been nice to have gone to a college that has a dorm with your great-grandmother's name on it.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So education was always a part of your family.
It always was. My dad and my mom, they didn't go very far. My dad graduated high school and then went to the war, and my mom, I think, got as far as the 11th grade. But they put in us a seed to excel. And my sister and I both graduated. My 2 brothers took the military route too, and they ended up going into war themselves. And but my sister and I did graduate with our degrees, and that was now passed on to our generation.
Wow. And I think it's interesting because your generation grew up with streets named after African Americans who were still alive at that time.
Right.
There really may have not have been a need to have a museum because you were living it and you were learning it every day.
Yes.
And it wasn't until later, maybe the 60s or 70s, when they started having African American, museums, because this integration had got us away from just that pride in who we were on an everyday basis.
Well, that parallels why we're here. We found that the things that were missing, especially here in West Michigan, were the fact that when we started our museum, we started with oral histories, and the whole theme of storytelling really took root to us. I mean, as we talk with people, we ended up getting stories and then contacts. Well, you got to talk to this guy. You have to talk to this lady. And so we were able to parlay that into a museum. Before we fast forward on my career, I graduated, worked for a couple art galleries in Philadelphia and Delaware, New Jersey, and then met my wife. She had a job here, so we moved to Michigan.
Okay.
So, but when we moved here with the intent of starting an art museum, art gallery, and so we did.
She's an artist as well?
No, she's a teacher.
Okay.
And what I wanted to do is to start an African American museum here, or African American gallery here in Grand Rapids, and because I knew art. I didn't really know archives.
Okay.
But I, at one point, because we were doing appraisals, because we were handling people's artwork, it kind of branched out. We started to handle African artifacts. Grand Rapids has been sending missionaries to Africa for years and years and years. So there's some collections here in town that are very, very valuable. They can go straight into the Smithsonian right now.
Wow.
And then they would ask us. They'd bring them to us and say, "Is this worth anything?" Or, "My dad died, and he left this box of stuff." And so we ended up starting to collect things other than artwork.
Wow.
Magazines, uniforms, records,
Did you
photographs.
get any freedom papers or anything like that? You did?
Yes,
Okay.
we've got a number of freedom papers, slave documents where they're listing the enslaved people, how much they cost.
Wow.
For accounting purposes in a lot of cases. There's a whole menagerie of things that can be collected, and I think that gets back to what we were saying before. Our history has always been disregarded and looked at as worthless. There's always been African American museums. As a matter of fact, the oldest African American museum is right in Chicago, the DeSable Museum.
Yeah.
Margaret Burroughs was one of the founders of the DeSable Museum. So
I interviewed her
You
years
did?
ago.
Oh,
Yeah, when I
my
was a
gosh.
reporter at the Inquirer in Battle Creek, she came and I got a chance to. And I have a picture with her.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, she came here. We brought her here to Grand Rapids, and it was Grand Rapids, Muskegon, and Lansing. Three people who wanted to start museums. And because she was the founder of the oldest African American museum, she gave us a blueprint. She said, "This is what you need to do. This is who you need to contact. These are the state representatives, federal representatives." So she gave us each a blueprint. And Muskegon Heights opened up their museum. Dr. Jackson was a retired doctor, so he had money to just buy a building. I think Lansing, the guy in Lansing, I think is still there. All Around the World Museum, I think it's called. He still is doing the same thing, but he concentrates more on African rather than African American. And then us, we came on board last, but it was worth the wait for us because over this period of time, we've amassed, man, our collection now. If you see what you see in here, this is probably 10% of what we have.
Wow.
We've got easily 8,000-9,000 pieces stored around. We've got 2 storage units. We've got stuff crammed in the back. We've got museums holding things for us, families holding things for us. So one of our major projects coming up really close is to find a bigger building.
Wow.
And in that, we took a big step toward that yesterday. And so we'll have an announcement coming soon.
Okay.
That's all they're letting me say.
Okay. And that started in what year? So you started the music?
It's 10 years. This is our 10th year anniversary.
Okay.
And our museum has been here in this location for 8 of those 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Before we had kind of a pop-up museum. Matter of fact, I believe we did the Black Arts Festival with a pop-up one year when we first started. And then we did pop-ups around the community for different organizations. As a matter of fact, we have one in Civic Theater right now. They're doing the Color Purple. So we were able to draw from our collection items that reinforce the story of the Color Purple. And we did a talk back with the film crew just last Friday, and that went really well because they have a lot of local people doing the production. And for us, it's again just kind of retelling the stories. But we found that there's so many stories here in Grand Rapids. Once we started doing the oral histories, it was just amazing. Some of the people that came from Grand Rapids, many Al Green, Floyd Mayweather, the DeBarge family. Right. But then there are other people like Walter Bergman, who was a freedom rider, Emory Douglas, who was the illustrator for the Black Panther papers. Names that you might have heard or may not have heard, but they came from here or they hail from here or they spent time here, and people didn't know them. So we took it upon ourselves to tell those stories.
Wow. And there's one African-American woman who was she worked at, I think, at the YWCA. She was an African-American woman. She was the first Black CEO, I think, of the Grand Rapids.
She was Helen Clater.
Right. And she was a scientist who helped develop, didn't she help develop like penicillin or for
she was a doctor.
Or something?
She was a doctor and worked in that field, I believe. But that's the same as I know we did something with a guy down in Kalamazoo that was relative to the lady with the Gila.
Jermaine Jackson.
Yes,
Henrietta Lacks.
Yeah, the Lacks.
Right.
Yeah. And we did his exhibit 3 years ago now. Okay. But there's all these connections within the state that people don't know about. I mean, I was just appointed to the governor's Freedom Trail Commission, which is studying the Underground Railroad through Michigan. Right. And of course, you got it down in Portage and other places down southern
Battle Creek,
and Coldwater, and
I think Schoolcraft.
Yeah. And but not so much so here in Grand Rapids, although there are a couple places we're going to be exploring now that I'm on the committee to see if I can find out more information. So what I'm trying to say is that while we have a lot, we are showing a lot, and we're telling a lot of stories, there's so much that needs to be done. And, we get authors in who write books. We did a podcast Saturday with a guy from Chicago who was a rower. And, like with the sculls, and they had a regatta this weekend, and he had the Arshay Cooper is his name, inner city Chicago youth, learned rowing, started a crew, and then became one of the top rowing crews here. This was their 30th anniversary. They actually made a movie, the most beautiful thing, I believe is the name of it. And he had his book there signing, and we were just fascinated with him. And he had some of his crew members there. How these guys from the inner city became the top rowers in the Midwest, and it's all these little stories that people don't know about that fascinate us. When we do oral histories, we're usually focused on one thing. A good example would be we had a lady to come in who was a quilter. She did this quilt of I think it was of the March on Washington. But we were talking to her about this quilt, and there was another lady that came in and sat down next to her, and they were kind of talking while they were waiting to get the cameras and everything ready. And she started talking about working in this factory that made the atom bomb.
Wow.
and so we were like, wait a minute. We just talked to her about 15 minutes about quilting. Oh, get back in the chair. So she tells the story about moving to Grand Rapids after living in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And said she worked in this factory, and they would always say, whatever you see here stays here. You can't tell everybody. And then she said she came here, looked at I guess they had the newsreels back in those days, and they were talking about dropping the atom bomb. And they showed the place where she worked.
Wow.
And she said all this time she never knew that she worked in the place that made the atom bomb or the parts for the atom bomb. And so it's literally amazing when we talk to people. I mean, there are Tuskegee Airmen and Negro League players and people who were in the civil rights movement. I mean, who are just kind of walking around.
And that's what I love about what you're doing, because you're making the awareness that these people are walking history books, but then we need to take it to a different level to say, how do we publish their stories, or how do we get their stories into the schools or into ways that we can share them with other people? Because when they're gone, their stories are gone. What I love about what you guys did when you started was you were collecting oral histories, and now the challenge would be to take those oral histories and bring them into light in some kind of way. So what are some things that you guys are doing maybe to share those? Are there book projects on the horizon? Documentaries, what are some things that you guys are looking to do or want to do with these stories?
Well, we've done a couple documentaries already, and we're working with a group here in town to tell another story here in town. Dr. Todd Robinson wrote a book called City Within a City, which was kind of a monumental piece of literature here in Grand Rapids, because it really went back and dug into the racism that comes through Grand Rapids. Called Grand Rapids Nice is what a lot of people call it, where kind of like they smiling in your face. And he really listed everything that happened, maybe 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And so that's being made into a documentary. There's another documentary that's being made about the Auburn Hills area of Grand Rapids, one of the very first places that got integrated. The museum, we're envisioning an expansion. It is going to happen. And once we do that, we're going to redo all of our exhibits to tell stories. One of the things that we've been pushing is telling people to pull out this little device from your pocket, and that's how you can start with your own family. So we've got a lady coming in that's going to be doing a couple classes on oral histories, specifically to young people, and tell them how to interview family members. Wish I had one of these when I was young. I did have one of the little old
cassette
reel-to-reel. No, not even cassette. I had a little reel-to-reel.
Okay.
When they first came out, my uncle had a big reel-to-reel, and he was like, "Here, start with this one here." And so those tapes are long gone, but it started an early fascination with just recording and getting the history down right. And so the other things that we're going to be doing, we have what we call the Never to Be Erased tour, where we tour other museums around the country. That's toward the end of the year. We've got a couple galas that are mainly fundraisers. We'll be honoring a gentleman here from Grand Rapids who in the 60s was one of the early activists, I would say. He was a student who just contacted. We've been trying a month to get a hold of the guy, but finally got a hold of him. He was in Jet and Ebony magazine for resisting facial hair. They were trying to make him shave his beard and mustache. They didn't ask the white kids to do it, and he resisted and got some fame for it, but never has been honored or talked about since. So we're trying to get a gala where we honor him. Every year we honor some history maker here in town.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And then we have a Juneteenth gala coming up that's mainly a scholarship. It's called Our Ancestors' Wildest Dreams, and it encourages young people to write stories. Tell us your Juneteenth story. Tell us a story that now that you know about Juneteenth that relates to your own life. And so those are some of the projects that we have currently. Our education department right now is working with a number of schools. We have the only museum high school in the country here in Grand Rapids, and our education crew works with them every year to help them learn more about museum sciences and history, collecting.
So what do you
history.
mean a museum high school? Is it a curriculum that goes into the schools, or is it your own?
It's a self-standing school.
Wow.
Used to be our old museum. They turned it into a high school now. And so they have regular high school classes, but then their supplementary classes are museum related. Wow. They're next door to the museum storage unit, which is stores all of the archives for the public museum and the city of Grand Rapids. So they can just walk 2 doors down and have access to
What's
all
the
of
school?
the,
What is the name of it?
It's called a museum high school.
Wow.
Grand Rapids Museum High School.
I love
and it's
it.
the only one in the country that we know of.
See, I would have went there. That would have been where I went to that
me
school.
too.
I want to go now.
If they had one of those when I was growing up, I would have been right there.
I love it.
And
I
think it's like a charter act. Well, no, I think you have to be recommended to get in there now because it's a waiting list. And I think they just graduated their first class maybe a year ago.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I love that. You guys are all a part of that.
Oh,
And, and then you have this amazing bookstore that's in here as well. And,
We Are Lit Books is who owns this part of the museum. Hopefully they'll come with us when we do our big move. But it's been a great draw for people. You know the story about what's happening to our authors and our writers in bookstores and libraries now.
Right.
And we've become that fallback place where people can come and find those authors that are being banned and taken out of schools in other venues. And so we've got a rebirth of people coming in looking for books and looking for certain authors.
I love that. And even with what's going on with the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., where they're saying they're trying to close it or take certain things out that they don't want shared or represented, that allows museums like yours or local museums to start highlighting and being that spot where people can come in their own communities and learn about that history and feel safe.
That's exactly right. I mean, we are, we're like say the tip of the spear is what I say a lot because it's the first place people come when they want to. They can't find something. I mean, you can almost find anything online, but still, there's something about a book, grabbing a book, and it's one of the things that I've just started doing myself is collecting first editions. We've got maybe 40 or 50 first editions, rare rare books now.
Wow.
And so when we open up, we've got a ton of regular books, but the rare books will be behind glass someplace that people will be able to look, but they won't be able to touch them. But I mean, some Dr. King first editions, Carter G. Woodson, Marcus Garvey. We've got a number of them that we collected over the years. And it was one of the very first things that I started collecting other than art. Once I found the value of them and that people were just getting rid of them.
Right. They don't know the value.
You could walk into a Goodwill and this is a first edition.
Right. Exactly. Well, this has been great. Now, did you do your homework of your Once Upon a Time story?
Okay. I might have already said it, but
Once upon a time, there was a little boy who...
It was a little boy who liked collecting things. And he collected baseball cards, comic books, and had a whole box of things under his bed. When he went to college and came back after his sophomore year, the box was gone. And his mother said, I had to get rid of all that stuff. And she didn't know that it was it was like maybe 12 years of collecting things from all over. And it just bummed me out. But then when he moved into his grandmother's house and found that she also was a collector, it reinforced it. But she had things like Colt revolvers or Stetson hats or land.
Right.
And so when we went through, he said had a Civil War uniform, all kinds of things. She had a Monopoly game where the houses were wood. And so when I moved here to Michigan, I told my dad and my uncle, don't throw out that stuff in grandmother's basement. Go through it first before you throw it out. And they didn't listen to me.
Oh, no.
So the young man was disappointed until he started his own museum.
There you go. That's how you do it. That's how you do it.
Yes.
I love it. Well, thanks again. And tell us your website so people can check more out.
Our website is www.graama.org. And that's purposeful because it honors my grandmother. And GRAAMA is a fitting name for a museum since grandmothers are the people who keep the history, keep the traditions, pass down the culture to the next generation. So you can just call us GRAAMA.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks again. And thank you all for this episode of Girls Talk Books. See you next time. Bye-bye. This episode was hosted by me, Sonya Hollins, and produced by M2 McMillan Media. Are you an author with an amazing story to share? Or do you work in the publishing industry with insight that can inspire others? Well, we want you on Girls Talk Books, where voices matter. Or are you an aspiring author with a story to tell? Well, we can help with that too. Visit girlstalkbooks.com to learn more.